This is Reflex Save Underdark, test recording 1.
The pilot episode.
Let's be off.
Alright.
So, just a little bit of introduction. This is a recording that we're doing on the drive home, rather than ramble about random nerd jank during the game. We're going to try and save that bundled up energy from spilling over into the recording and record it here instead, because it's fun to talk about this stuff.
Yeah. We are in my car heading to drop Zimma home, so the studio that we record in is at our house, Jen and I's house, so we got a bit of time here to kill, so we sort of thought of doing this on the way. If you hear me yelling at other motorists, don't be alarmed, basically.
Oh yeah, and obviously, as the passenger, I will be the one who is looking after all of the equipment, so worry not, Callan's eyes are on the road.
Yep, I am not looking at the laptop screen.
Okay, well, that was certainly an interesting game.
Yeah, I feel like with these these Underdark sessions, like, we're gonna be careful about releasing them before the episodes come out.
Yeah, we do.
So the question I have for you is, do you want to talk about the session, or do you want to talk about other stuff?
Oh, that's difficult. I kind of want to talk about the session.
We're just got to make sure we release it after. So this will be coming out. Oh, geez, what episode will it be?
Well, we were just released episode 40.
No, 39.
39. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 40's up for editing.
Yeah. Then there's 2. Geez, 3. I think this is going to be like 44, 45-ish.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. I mean, this is also, funnily enough, as a player, this is your opportunity to ask me questions as a DM, and I might spill a bit of extra information here you wouldn't get in the sessions otherwise.
Yeah,
so.
no, that's true. I do quite often, as someone who has DM'd a lot myself, I do often have like mechanical questions that aren't always appropriate to ask in the middle of the game.
Or get cut for time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, fire away. Or if you want to talk about a different topic.
Oh, no, I'm just thinking about it. I've put myself on the spot by pulling out a microphone.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so we just fought a Bulette.
Yeah, classic D&D monster.
That is I mean, I spoiled it before you'd even told me what it was.
I know.
But, like, as soon as I saw something burrowing towards us, I had an inkling.
There's only so many things it could be.
Yeah. But was that actually something that was part of the ship encounter, or was that a random Icewind Dale encounter?
Yeah, actually, so the interesting thing about that encounter is that when you approach the ship, which you guys haven't found out yet, but I'm happy to spoil it a little bit here. It's called the Indescendant, something like that. When you approach the ship, you get ambushed by the carrion crawlers, which you guys fought in the previous episode. And then the intent is, if you leave the ship, you actually get attacked by the Bulette. But in this particular case, because you fought and then backed off, I sort of used that as my own cue to throw it at you, because you kind of were leaving the area, and I also wanted to punish you guys a little bit for just going straight for a rest after a fight. So yeah.
Well, obviously my thoughts were, oh no, there's going to be more fights on that ship. We better make sure we're prepared, guys.
Yeah, and that's not a bad thing, but I mean, as a DM, I think sometimes you have to look at the situation your players are in and go, well, I can't just sort of allow people to rest after every encounter, right? Otherwise, it really unbalances the play, and it really doesn't give you guys a good time if you sort of not threatened, or if the rest is not challenged, you get too complacent, really. Something that I actually enjoyed a bit more about
4th edition is the distinguishment between abilities that recover on a short rest and once per encounter abilities, because they sort of fulfill a similar role, but one like design. Obviously, 4E is more designed around combat, and mostly combat. Yeah. So
I feel like you're leading me into the thing that we normally talk about with 4E. This will become a common theme, us talking about random things that we often discuss. Do you want me to talk about it, or?
Yeah, no, I think this is a
Good opportunity.
Good opportunity.
So I've always said, and I've said this to you a number of times, but I've always said that 4E is a really fascinating edition of D&D. So there's a very good reason why 5th edition was a bit of a return to form to 3.5 and 3, where the mechanics are much more similar to that edition of D&D. 4E was a big departure from 3.5 in that it was very combat focused. In fact, one of the biggest gripes that a lot of players have with it is that it's only combat focused, and they're sort of expecting you to make the non-combat yourself, which is all well and good, but when you put all the mechanics focused around combat, that is what the game sort of tends to be around.
Yeah. Game mechanics encourage players to act a certain way.
And they inform DMs how to run games.
Yeah, so if the vast majority of the rules are telling the DM, if the rules are saying to the DM, this is what you're supposed to be doing, the DM is encouraged to follow those rules rather than making up their own.
Yeah, and as a DM, if all of your characters are geared towards combat, which in 4th edition, that's how it is, all your abilities and all of your magical powers are geared towards combat, well, that's how you let the players shine. And so that's where you end up putting them in. And I've made this comment before, but I think that 4th edition would have been better marketed as a tactics game. So a game purely where the encounter is exactly what you do. You set up a map, you get your players in like for a Friday night game night, and you're like, cool, we got 3 hours, let's play this combat scenario. And then you just have at it. And I think if you've played like Final Fantasy Tactics, Fallout Tactics, various other tactics style games, I know there's others, but that's what it's good at.
It's like actually kind of funny that 4E didn't do well, and kind of because of that, there was no effort to like make a video game replication of the system.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that it would have performed much better than like 3.5 or Pathfinder does.
Yeah.
Because those games are not able to replicate that a lot of the systems that a more RP focused game has.
That's the thing. So I think what they found out was that people don't. They sort of thought that people were just wanting combat out of D&D, and I think I think it's very clear, especially if you take 5th edition into account. One of the beautiful things about 5th edition is that more than any other previous editions of the game, it's really introduced tabletop gaming and Dungeons and Dragons to a wider group of people. It allows people to more easily step into role-playing games.
I have a lot of gripes with 5th edition as a system. Which,
we'll talk about them over these episodes.
Yeah, you'll get to hear all about my personal opinions and Callan's personal opinions about many editions of Dungeons & Dragons. But at the end of the day, 5th edition has been wonderful for introducing people of all varieties into tabletop role-playing, which is a hobby that I love, and if you love a hobby, you should want to expand.
Yeah, and I think that's what the biggest takeaway from 5th edition. So that's my 2 cents on that. Anyway, but yeah, so 4th edition, So what were you saying about 4th that you wanted to expand on? Because I sort of took over.
Obviously there was a bit of a leading question, but
Bloody hell, mate, you're leading me into these questions.
hey, I'm trying to run a show here.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah,
but in 4th edition, right, there would have been no short rest there.
No.
Because we would have expended like maybe a daily power dealing with those carrion crawlers, but we'd have other daily powers in the tank like we did in that situation. We had out of the spell slots. But any encounter powers that we would have expended would have instantly come back at the end of that encounter. There would have been no need for downtime, but in 5th edition, that's a short rest instead.
And as a DM, you kind of got to gauge whether the characters deserve to be uninterrupted or not. You can randomize it, like every time they take a short rest, you can roll a die, go on the random encounter table and see if they do. I often find it's better to make a call if you think the characters have done enough to warrant a short rest, or if they are just sort of taking the mickey out of you.
Your lucky bards can't learn rope trick, otherwise I would have just been like, we're taking a rest. What do you mean we're taking a rest? Fucking rope trick.
Leomin's Tiny Hut's the other bane of my existence.
I'm level 5 next level.
But to be fair, I have developed countermeasures.
Yeah, no, I've been on the receiving end of that as well, and sometimes it's just like, well, I guess this encounter has a 5th level spellcaster.
And I guess the other thing as well is what kind of DM are you, right? So some DMs are purposely combative, like they are trying to challenge, like seriously challenge a party, and they will artificially make encounters harder than they need to be. They're the DM. I'm not quite that type of DM. I like to be fair. So when, I don't know if you guys, I mean, I know the Zimma as a player, you know this, you played with me as a player in a couple of campaigns I've run. I rarely try and make things unfair. I try and run monsters how I think that they would operate. So if they're like creatures, they might not have a coherent strategy, right, to do something. If they're mindless enough, like zombies, they might continue attacking the same target even when it's down. And when they're intelligent creatures, like, I don't know, a vampire or just something with good intelligence, I might specifically make them target, focus fire a creature, use their best abilities. And if they're really intelligent, I might have them take someone when they're already unconscious.
Well, there should be like a difference in tactics between even, like, say, fighting a base vampire and fighting, Strahd von Zarovich.
Yes.
Strahd is an intelligence 20 character. Basic vampire has like 14.
Yeah, and I think that's the key difference. And I think it's about letting the players know that the intelligence of the creatures is what can make them more dangerous, right? And also, not intelligent creatures can be dangerous because they might just choose a target and just focus it down.
Yeah.
Right.
By the same token, though, and a zombie might continue just wailing on the AC 20 paladin,
true.
Until it gets that 20.
True. And the other thing as well is, like, often creatures that have a very neutral intelligence, that's like a beast or a monster that has like a base 10, they're not dumb, but they're not smart. I will often have them randomize their attacks if they're close to a number of people.
Yeah.
So if I can position the creature so that there's only one target attack, that's one thing. But if I am in a position where he's got multiple, I'll often split the attacks up. That depends on the creature, though, for me, at least.
Well, I think you'll find you're in luck, because I don't particularly want to take Lehman's Tiny Hunt as a bard. If I was a wizard, I absolutely would take Lehman's Tiny Hunt. But
you guys have an interesting party makeup for this campaign.
But no, as a bard, I want to focus on spells that have an immediate effect.
Yeah.
I also I don't have to, but I like to focus on enchantment and illusion as a bard.
Yeah, I think you can see that in this campaign for sure. Like, it's not a blast wizard, it's not a...
Well, I have shatter, but I think that's thematically appropriate.
I think you need some damaging, but it's like you're focusing fire on like fireballs and stuff like that.
Shatter absolutely justified itself against that bullet.
Well, yeah. If you're listening to this before you're listening to the episode, you're doing a disservice. Go listen to the episodes first.
Well, we'll be releasing the episode first.
Yes, but just in case, let's just say, go take a listen.
Yeah. This won't be this isn't going to be for a play-by-play. This is going to be for a more high-level discussion.
I do, on the high-level discussion, so talking about different ways in which other systems sort of handle resting and mechanics. So the idea of a short rest in 5th edition is to allow players not to have to pick up a wand and spam healing in between encounters, which is what a lot of Pathfinder and 3.5 turned into. So you have your own hit die to recover and whatnot. So one of the actual mechanics I really enjoyed, and it's in Starfinder, Paizo's other TTRPG, the sci-fi one, and it's the resolve mechanic. I think it's called resolve. It's where each character gets a certain number of resolve points which level up with them. And resolve is tied to their ability to get back up after they've been knocked unconscious. So if you have no resolve left, you will just die. But if you have at least a quarter of it, you can spend a resolve point to get back up, I believe is the thing. And there's some mechanics around that. But the really interesting thing that they tied that in is not only do they make some abilities or spells consume resolve, so that you have to sort of think about when you're using resolve to self-stabilize versus using it to use abilities. They also tied it into they have a short rest mechanic that's 10 minutes, and you effectively have two pools of hit points in that game. Stamina points and hit points. Stamina points kind of represent your stamina, where when you get attacked and damaged by a monster, it'll chip away at the stamina pool first, kind of like temporary hit points, before it hits your actual hit points. Now, that seems a bit convoluted, but the big difference is when you spend a resolve point on a 10-minute rest, you can recover your stamina points entirely through that mechanic, but not your hit points. So your hit points are your actual life total, but your stamina allows you to keep fighting. And when you're down on resolve, you can't recover that stamina, you're just beaten up, worn out, right?
So one of the other consequences of like lack of downtime in 4th edition, which I think is positive, is that they actually had to figure out something else to do with hit dice.
Yep.
So a lot of particularly healing abilities in 4th edition actually didn't heal you all that much. But what they did do is allow you to immediately spend a hit die, which would restore the 1d whatever plus your con modifier in addition to the healing. So the healing itself would only be like, oh, this is like 1d6 or 1d4 plus wisdom, but also you may choose to spend one of your hit die on top of that.
Yeah, isn't it the way they got clerics to also not have to take just healing spells? Like 3.5 was, you could convert any of your spells to healing, but clerics often felt like a walking medipack for that.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't just clerics as well. Like there was a lot, like in 4th ed they called them like leaders. There was like people, there was like inspiring characters or like warlords who would be like tactics oriented, but they had like they would like have like rallying abilities, which would allow people to like draw on their own natural reserves more easily and spend healing surges in addition to providing group buffs. Okay,
I never played a lot of 4th edition in the end.
Like I didn't either. I never really got past like I never got into the double digits, so I never got into like the Paragon levels because 4th went up to level 30.
Right.
But 4th had like other problems where it was like you needed to start with your primary stat maxed out. You needed to like every single +1 that you could get to your attack rolls, to your damage, to your saving throw DC. It was all just way too important to like dip into anything.
Yeah, again, I think if again, this is a marketing thing. If your system is involved just around combat, and it was really good at making combat diverse and interesting, then that's what they needed to market it as. I reckon they could still be selling 4th edition now, just not called 4th edition, called D&D Tactics, and then whatever's 5th edition now would be 4th edition.
I definitely agree. I also think that there's some, like, they leaned too far away from 4th, and they just didn't actually carry across any of the actually good ideas from the edition, including things like healing surges, things like being bloodied, which was an excellent way of like...
I don't like telling you when the creatures are nearly dead.
Well, no, it's not nearly dead, it's half dead.
Half dead.
But that's
still a lot of information.
Yeah, but there's a tactics change. Creatures would either start to disengage at that point. They would summon in minions at that point if they had any.
I definitely think if you're, again, basing your entire system around combat, that you turn that into a mechanic, right? That becomes part of the creature's tactics as well,
Minions are another great one. Rather than having, like, oh, these goblins have 4 hit points. It's like, no, this goblin will die as soon as any amount of HP damage is dealt to it.
Poor gobbies.
Kobolds as well. I love kobolds, but...
I know,
They... D&D's done kobolds dirty for a long time.
You say that.
Okay, look, I say that. It's complete tangent here, but like...
Well, that's what this whole thing's about.
Yeah, Pun was a kobold, and Pun was like the epitome of this is why 3.5 needs to go.
So people are aware, Pun was a character build you could do. I think with 3rd specifically, was it?
3.5, it was...
Didn't it make him like immortal and a god by level 5 or something like that?
It was this weird combination of you can trade traits and then you could like turn into something and then trade traits with your familiar, and then your familiar could trade traits back to you.
Right.
And so you could just be like, oh, I have plus intelligence, and then the familiar would trade the plus intelligence back to you, but without the time limit.
Right. And so you would just get to a point where your intelligence or your stat is effectively infinite, and therefore you're a god of that universe no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's just like, oh, well, now I have as much in any stat as I want, and can just roll, like, it doesn't matter what I'm rolling.
Wasn't it also like, God damn it. Wasn't it also like, 3.5 also famously had the peasant railgun, right? Which was still...
Like, the peasant railgun is such a funny thing, because lots of people know about it, but, like, nobody's ever going to let that work, right?
No DM worth his salt should let that work.
Because that's always, like, that's a consequence of applying real-world logic to the technical reactions of a game engine in which there is no game engine. Like, if you were playing a video game and set that up, that might break the physics engine of the video game.
Yeah, but then it gets patched, right? This is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the reason why you have a DM in the first place. So you'd be able to say no.
Yeah.
It's very important as well, and this is, the DM has to respect the rules of which they're playing and the internal consistency and allow players to feel powerful. It's a fantasy at the end of the day. But you as players also need to get to a point where it's like, if the DM says no to something, that's the rules for this game. But yeah, the peasant railgun, it was... Do you want to explain the peasant railgun?
Yeah. So the peasant railgun's funny, right? Because it essentially held actions fire off, like, all within a single round, right? So if you have a series of peasants all lined up and instruct them all to hold their action to pass an object to the person in front of them, you can make a single object move as far as you have peasants in a single round, and
which is 6 seconds.
So you could theoretically have something move hundreds of feet in 6 seconds, which would imply that it has a certain velocity.
Yes.
Which could, then, well, if the Munchkins got their way, could then presumably, punch through the walls of the big bad evil guy's impenetrable stronghold. But
it's the funny thing about it is it's such a thing that, like, when you think about it now, 5th edition doesn't necessarily stop you from doing that either. You could go and pay a bunch of homeless people from whatever town that you are in your fantasy town, and ask them to all stand in a line and then use their reaction as a held action to pass the thing from one person to another. And you could do the same thing. But again, you don't hear about it much anymore because people know that's kind of silly.
It's one of those. It's one of those things that kind of like existed in the early internet. The early 2000s.
Yeah.
Kind of forums of when 3rd edition D&D was first taking off.
3rd edition was like the first edition that had the internet as an influence, and it was still really young in the sense that, like, it's not like it is now, but it was the first edition that wasn't just spread by traditional marketing or word of mouth or anything like that.
It was also the first time that Wizards of the Coast was publishing. So it's really funny because Wizards of the Coast are originally Magic the Gathering creators. And the funny part about that is that they were like, when they were making Magic the Gathering, they wanted to make a card game inspired by D&D specifically. And then a decade later, they're like, oh, well, I guess we can just buy D&D and make that as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Because TSR kind of dropped the ball big time in the 80s.
Yeah. Oh, boy. Well, yeah.
And 3rd edition was obviously famously buggy enough that they needed an entire revision a couple of years later, which was then not that much better.
And then they realized they didn't license it properly, so the guys from Paizo kind of started their own little tabletop game.
I honestly think the open gaming license was the best thing that ever happened.
I do too. I think that, like, those companies are also very different in, like, what they've produced and the content they have, then you can enjoy them separately, and they don't, like, a lot of people, they don't overlap so much with 5th, people.
They don't overlap anymore, yeah.
Yeah, they overlapped a lot in 3.5. People used to... I know we used to do it too. We used to call Pathfinder 3.75.
Yeah. I mean, that's essentially how Pathfinder started. It was just like, this is our fan revision to Dungeons and Dragons with all the serial numbers filed off.
And these are the fixes of, like, because I mean, you look at the skill list now for 5th edition compared to say Pathfinder, you're like, wow, that's condensed a lot. The Pathfinder skill list was condensed heavily from 3.5 as well.
Yeah, and then 5th edition has like half as many again.
Yeah. And we're coming to the end of the episode, I think. Spoilers, but we might talk in future episodes about some of the limitations of 5th edition because of that sort of simplification.
There'll be a lot of griping about 5th edition, but that is for another time.
To be clear, we love 5th edition.
We love D&D, and 5th edition is a big part of that.
But
I think that's the end of the episode. So thanks for listening to the potential pilot of Reflex Save Underdark.
Now get the fuck out of my car.
All right, catch you later, Callan.
See ya.